Um, Hi, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Colum, for having us here. And thank you so much, Stephen Huyler, for having written this brilliant memoir called Transformed by India, A Life. Stephen has now been coming to India for 54 years?
53 years.
53 years.
Yep. Well, this would be the 54th, wouldn't it? Yeah.
This, yes. So 53 to 54 years. He's many things. He's a cultural anthropologist. He's an art historian. He's a writer. He's a photographer. And a lot of his work that he has done in India has concentrated on the arts and crafts of the country, various states that he has traveled to, and he's worked a lot with women, documenting how women in rural areas, mostly rural areas.
Rural and urban.
Urban.
Yeah, I've written 3 books on Indian women's point of view on who they are. Yeah.
Exactly. And so the perspectives that Stephen brings to India are very, very, very refreshing. And looking at India through Stephen's eyes is something that I have really enjoyed doing while reading his book and talking to him most of today. But I would like you all also to see what I did, and through a presentation that Stephen is going to lead us through of his photographs that he's taken over these last 53, 54 years. So, Stephen.
So I came to India as a writer. I'm primarily a writer, but I've become known as a photographer, and some think of me primarily as a photographer, and I have a lot of good photography books. I've been lucky in my publications, so they're very top publishers. I'm going to show you some slides, some images. There are 2 screens. Those at the back may see everything blocked. That's your choice. If you want to move forward, do. If you don't, it's about 5 minutes or 7 minutes. I'm going to go quickly through the pictures. Somehow I did it wrong. They did tell me how. So sorry. Okay, sorry. Yeah, they should be on both screens. Okay. Can you put them on both screens, please, at the booth? So I came to India when I was just 19, overland, in this. I'm so sorry. It's not changing. There. I came overland on this route for 9 months of travel by myself, by local transport. So local bus, local train. In India, 3rd-class train at a budget of $2 a day, of which I spent $1 a day in 1971. My goal, I was invited by Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay and Rukmini Devi Arundale to India to do the work that I do. When I got here, on the day I arrived, Kamala Devi ji basically gave me a carte blanche. She asked me to give her a map of where I wanted to go, and she gave me a home to live in every single place I went. She wrote personal letters. This great, great woman, Rukmini Devi, I went down there early on because she was a friend of one. They were both close friends of one of my American mentor, Beatrice Wood, and Rukmini opened her life to me. My life. She opened my life for me, and many years later, I worked directly for her. I'm still trying to navigate this. On my first trip began, can you see these? If you can't, if you're blocked, is there a way to get this screen up too, please? We were told that there would be both screens on. The terracotta sculptures of Tamil Nadu I began documenting on that first trip. I was doing a cross-cultural survey of Indian craftsmanship and folk art, which is why I was working with both of those people, but Kamala Devi ji particularly. And Oh, I hope this works. If it doesn't work, I think. And I began also documenting women's kolam, the rangoli, the alpona that the women do on the ground. And I was fascinated by ephemeral art, by the idea that something could be made for one moment only, like these beautiful I think we can't do this if it's going to take so long to keep changing them. These beautiful columns that are done every single day of the year in front of, at that point, more than 1 million homes just in Tamil Nadu, and they prided themselves in never repeating a design. It just blew my socks off. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and began documenting it. There is a certain irony I recognize to documenting ephemeral art by immortalizing it on film, but that is what I was doing. That's an American approach to things. These are my first 2 books, Village India, which was a survey I was commissioned to write about by a good publisher, about a survey of all of rural India. It was the first history in it of rural India that I'm aware had been written, but also a survey of 14 Indian states. And Gifts of Earth was my doctoral dissertation on terracotta, the potter's art, and also a survey of 14 Indian peninsular states. These are votive terracottas given, as you know, here in Bengal. And we still don't have slides on the right, on your left, but I'm sorry if you can't see them. But if enough of you are blocked by the podium, should I just give it up? Can you see? Okay, so the terracottas are ephemeral. They're given for one moment only, and they have no value after that. That's something that just fascinates me, and I've been documenting that for 50 years now. And they are made in virtually every district of India. I'm going to just keep going, but these are Bengali. So then my second book was Painted Prayer, third book, sorry, was Painted Prayers, Women's Art in Village India, and it was a documentation through Rizzoli and Thames and Hudson, and then in French and German editions, of women's art and identity in India through numbers of Indian states, that ephemeral art primarily on the walls and on the floors. I'm sorry if this is taking too long. So this is, for example, in the state of Orissa or Odisha, that's just to the south of us here. For those of you that are not Indian, I see there's some other foreigners in the audience, so I'm just speaking to that. But that concept, again, you can see this woman who is making something for just one basic, for a few days of use, and it's going on clear, coming, and then drying white, opaque white, to end up with something like this. And then the next time it'll be completely different, and the next time completely different. And she prides herself in not repeating herself. Or those columns in far south India, this woman who you're seeing from the side, old woman who's making this all freehand, right? This beautiful, complex design seen from the roof. And the next one, I hope, is just extraordinary. And the fact that she does this every day and a different one is just, to me, incomprehensible. That quality, that idea of ephemerality, the idea that you make something and that you understand it for that moment is something that's very alien to most Western ways of thinking. And I've learned that is a fundament of Indian civilization. It's absolutely, not only in columns or terracottas, but in puja, in so many other things that are an aspect. Yes, we have it in cooking in the West. You could say we have it in prayer, but there's very little ephemeral art where there is in India. I'm sorry. The last one was my book, Meeting God. I spent years documenting Hindu ritual that ended up in exhibitions. We'll talk about that, and a book, Meeting God, which is about daily devotion primarily in rural India, but in the kind of India that is not documented in books or was not documented in books. And you'll see that it has to do still with that aspect of ephemerality, of the moment of the Abhishek here or whatever it might be. And then it's done again, even if the image itself might be permanent, like this temple. The woman worshiping right there at its base is just fleeting. And otherwise it's gone and not intended. Or here, these Durga Puja images, which are made for just the period of the festival, honored, worshipped, and then taken to the river for Visarjan here in Calcutta. And every year this is done, but these magnificent sculptures are then immersed in the water and allowed to dissolve. To me is just profound. And so then my books about women's identity, after the Puja one, did this book, Daughters of India, and I surveyed over 1,000 women all over the subcontinent. I believe I've traveled more extensively than any other foreigner in India in 53 years. I mean, extensively more. I've worked in every single district of India, as far as I know, except up in the far northeast. But I interviewed women all throughout the country, and then I decided that I didn't want to make broad generalizations, so I wrote the book just in 20 different women's points of view, but as diversely as possible. So I let them tell their stories. I showed them photographically. So these are the 20 women, and they were from everything from elderly to young, from Dalit to wealthy dowager, from a woman doctor in Kerala, from a matrilineal family, to women who were very much behind the veil up in the Northwest, to the woman on the left who was self-made, sold her business for several $1 million, to Bengali Chitrakar on the far left, to a Dalit woman in the center with her firstborn child and wondering what she can do about it and with it, to Shamli Kastigir, who's Sudhir Kastigir's daughter here in Shantiniketan, who is telling her story. She was an environmental artist. Just all of that is, and then it ends before this book, the new one, with Somak Raychaudhury, who was the most phenomenal woman, who was married when she was 14, isolated by her husband for 15 years, not allowed to see or be seen by anyone through his psychosis, not through a cultural mandate. And during that period of time, when she was in total isolation, except for their baby son who grew up, she began to create the sculptures using the mud from the edge of her well and interior well, because she wasn't allowed outside, right, for 15 years. And she began to sculpt the walls of her houses with jali, of her interior of her house with jali, which, as far as she knew, she had invented in order to trap the wind because it was so hot in there. And then she began to sculpt the jali and the rest of her wall with sculptures that were unlike any style that she had ever seen, is unlike any style that existed. This is in Surguja, in a district in Chhattisgarh. And so I did a monograph on her and a film on her that got a lot of film awards, and a documentary, and it's not changing. And so that's basically where we are. And we come right up to the present, and this is my life, and I'm going to turn it over to you. So please.
Thank you so much for that, Stephen. I'm going to use the time we have left in order to delve into some of the things that you just spoke about. But my first question to you is that, you pedaled a bicycle rickshaw into India on October 27th, 1971. That was your 20th birthday.
That was.
At that time, India was going to war. You describe yourself as naive and open-minded. I have two questions for you. One, how much of that Stephen, that naive and open-minded Stephen still exists today? And how much of that India do you still get to see when you travel now?
How much of what?
How much of that India do you still get to see when you travel now?
Okay, answering the first question, am I naive? Perhaps not. I have seen, I've had lots of challenges, which I write about in this book too. But I'm always a glass half full, and I believe in trusting people, and that if I trust people, they will trust me. The doors that opened for me through Kamala Devi ji, etc., were just extraordinary, and people invited me into their homes and opened to me freely. And because they trusted me, I trusted them. I learned to trust people. And so that can be by cynics called naivete, but I don't think it's naive necessarily. I'm not suggesting that you're a cynic. And then the other question was about the India that I see today. India is constantly changing. It's almost unrecognizable from what it was when I came here 54 years ago. In some ways, and in some ways, the quality that I admired so much is very present still. And people have, to me, from the very beginning, from my first trip, said to me that India was losing its traditions, that it was changing too fast, that it wasn't the real India, that was, I don't think that's true. I think India, the pulse of India has always been change. It's always been adaptation. It's never been stagnant tradition. It's never been something that's hidebound. It's always moving. Even the traditions that we like to think of as hidebound are always moving. People are always marrying people out from outside of their community, and communities are always in transition because of that. There's flux everywhere. And so I see an India that has those values of the ephemerality that I spoke about. Those are still being practiced in some ways, like the kolams in Tamil Nadu are being, not exactly for the same reasons necessarily, but they're still being made. But their ephemerality is lost in some other areas. The art is being lost. But in the same breath, it's still, there's a quality that's still there today, because it's just the adaptation, it's just the change, it's just what happens. And that quality of Indianness is still there. In fact, in some ways, it's far stronger, because people are not the victims anymore of the years of oppression that was there from empire. You know, people are grown into themselves with self-pride that's wonderful to witness. While as when I was in India in my first years, there was, I know you were going to ask a question about that. There was people asked, why did I want to do what I was doing? Because they thought I was trying to document backward India. They said you were working with backward India. That was, I would say, 1,000 or 2,000 separate Indians in my first few years said that. No one, not a single person has mentioned that in the last 15 or 20 years. Not a single person has thought, because people don't think like that anymore. Indians are proud. All of you are proud of your heritage, as you should be, because it is fabulous. And so you don't need somebody like me you don't need somebody like me to point it out anymore. But what I was good about at the time was making a documented of something that wasn't being documented then. Because there was this wish and this push to be out from the yoke of someone else's ownership, in a sense, and to modernize so quickly that some people lost sight of the values of their own culture. Just how wonderful it is.
Yeah, absolutely. But I wanted to ask you, you and your wife both fell violently ill while you were in this country.
We did.
At one point, you were threatened at gunpoint and asked to leave a district in Odisha. Did you ever doubt your love for this country? Why did you keep coming back again and again?
You know, I knew you were going to ask that, and now I'm a little speechless. No, I never doubted it. I just knew it was right for me. You know, it is who I am. And it's not any other area. And it's not that I come with rose-colored glasses, although I might have when I was that naive 20-year-old until I was maybe 30. And, you know, some of these things being held at machine gun point and escorted out of a district is kind of dramatic, you could say. And almost dying of malaria or a dengue fever, or my wife truly, I was told that we were on our honeymoon, basically, was told that she would not survive in Mumbai by a lung surgeon. She had lung surgery in Breach Candy Hospital. Those were deeply shocking. But did they destroy my belief that what I was doing was right for me to do? No.
No, but also the term culture shock appears a few times in the book. Strangely enough, you only feel culture shock when you go back to the United States.
That book was written I don't feel it at all either direction anymore, but when I came to India, no, I didn't have any culture shock. But when I went back, I felt so at home in India that I just remember that I was introduced, how I was introduced to India. So it was through the crafts and folk art. It was through things made by hand. It was through the substance of mitti and khadi and things like that. The things that are made by hand and have texture and form. And then I flew back to the United States. I had come overland. I flew back to the United States, and suddenly I was in supermarkets and department stores. And if those of you that know are old enough to remember Muzak, piped music in the stores, and I literally, my wife took me to choose. We were engaged to be married, and she took me to my fiance took me to a store to choose some sort of patterns, and I ran out screaming. I mean, I wasn't literally screaming, but I felt like I was, and I just couldn't take it because all the ceramics were identical, and they didn't have any hand of man in them. It was just awful, and the whole shop, the whole department store, just. But I changed, I'm adapted.
No, absolutely. Also, you've mentioned it a couple of times already, but I would like to ask you to maybe go into a little bit of detail about how the freedom fighter Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay and also the Bharatanatyam exponent Rukmini Devi Arundel, what were the kind of doors that these two women opened for you in India?
Yeah, I mean, I did sort of speak about that, but that they... Well, there were so many doors. One in Kamala Devi ji, she was such a humble woman that I didn't even realize until the last year. There's a new biography about her in which I just was blown away by recognizing how much she had influenced me in her perception of the dignity of humanity, whoever any individual is. I have been fortunate that I don't judge. I mean, we all are judgmental, but human beings are by nature, but I really don't look at people by less intelligent, more educated, less educated. And I'm sure it's Kamala Devi that helped me, edged me into that when I go into a village, I don't care if a person's illiterate or literate. They may be the most intelligent person in the world and not be able to read one letter and be highly educated simply because they're not literate. The two don't compare. One can be educated in many other ways. Wisdom comes in all kinds of ways. And I think that's what she taught me, was the dignity of humanity in however they show themselves, they reveal themselves. And because I come in with a sense of respect, because they taught me, both women, taught me that lived that aspect of just respecting people that they met. I go into communities and am easily welcomed in. And Rukmini Devi treated me like her son, wanted me to run Kalakshetra, which of course it would have been totally wrong, which I knew, and so I declined. for a foreigner to be in that kind of position back in the 80s. But I did work at Kalakshetra in what was Madras for 4 years in their administration, and it taught me a great deal too. So there are just many things that both women taught me. Yeah.
And what made you want to focus on women artists and their art and their craft as much as you've done? Was it just your inherent innate feminism, or was there something more to it?
Well, definitely I'm a feminist. And I was abused as a child, and so I have an empathy for women and women's plight at the hands of men. And that's something that I'm always been aware of, and was never blocked for me. But also, all of my mentors have been women. It's like the woman that introduced me, Beatrice Wood, was the one of the founders of the Dada movement. She was the partner of Marcel Duchamp, she was the friend. She was one of the founders of the World Crafts Council, as was Kamala Devi. Kamala Devi was the president. And so it just kind of, she was my mentor in America. She introduced me to these two great women. They introduced me. Kamala Devi put me in homes everywhere, but it was the women who were the freedom fighters. It was the homes of them, or the women who set up all the crafts cooperatives throughout the country, because that's what Kamala Devi did under Gandhi, if you don't know. Under Gandhiji, she founded all the crafts cooperatives, or many of them in the country at that time. And so there were women that ran them, and so I was staying in their homes, and so they also mentored me, and so why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I? It's odd because I'm a male. I know I'm a white American male. You can't get more privileged than that, and yet I write books about women's identity, and I know it's very strange. What right have I to do that? I don't know. I don't know that I do have a right, but the things have to be said. They have to, and maybe it's important to say it as a male. One of the most difficult audiences, I haven't told you this, or maybe it's in the book, but I was doing a book tour for my book, Daughters of India, and I was sent to Calcutta, and I came here, and I came to Calcutta, and the audience was about 1,000 seething women, angry women, that who could be this Western white male, talking to us about Indian women. And there was this huge audience. And I was up there, and I started talking, and I started showing my images. And I could watch them melt. I could just see it just began to change. And by the halfway through, I knew I had them. And by the end of it, they wanted these leading feminists wanted their selfies taken with me. I'm a non-threatening male. I don't know. I admire women, but I don't objectify. I don't know. It's not that I train myself in that way. It's just my nature.
No, absolutely. But just since we're talking about women, you mentioned your book on Sonabai Rajwar. You write in the book, you write in Transformed by India, that there's no oppression or difficulty that cannot be overcome with creative solutions. This woman was kept indoors for 15 years of her life. Can you tell us a little more about the story of her courage?
I wouldn't use the word courage per se, but she was in an untenable situation. When you're in a home that had, as houses are in those communities, they have no exterior windows. She couldn't see outside, except if the door opened quickly or closed, for 15 years. She wasn't allowed out. And so just imagine what that would be like. I mean, it is unimaginable. And so she began to bring her outside world in. If you or I were in that situation, this is why I was so deeply struck by the story. If you or I were in that situation, I might well be so depressed that if I was, and I am a creative person, if I was creative in my output, it might show my dark anger. But what she created was a beautiful world, the world she missed outside. She created this something that made you want to smile, made you remember the forests and the jungles and the animals and the people and the dance and the music and the things there. I mean, it was incredible. And that's, to me, that point, is that we can make the choice. That's why she was so extraordinary. We can make the choice to give up or to respond with anger to the people like our new leader in my country, America, and say, you know, I could get all upset if I wished. But I can find a creative way to respond. We can always, I mean, look at what we're doing to the earth right now. You know, we're destroying its resources. But is there a way, like Sonabai, that we can find ways to creatively change the ways in which we are responding to the earth and everything else, to racism, to anything it might be? Can we use our creativity and be positively enhancing of life rather than destructive with what we do? That's why that message is so important. And that's a deep Indian message, an Indian person. You know, so
I would request you, if you could, as an anthropologist, objectivity was something that you prized, and it was a hard-won objectivity that you learnt and espoused. But there was a moment when all that changed, and you write about that very, very, very eloquently in your book. Could you read that section?
Yes, this was the introduction or the preface to my book, Meeting God, which is the elements of Hindu devotion. And it was published by Yale University Press, you know, which is fairly prestigious, and 60,000 copies in color, you know, which was unheard of at that time. And I knew I was putting myself on the line with this, but one has to make risk. And so I published this, and it was very risky, it felt at the time, as an anthropologist. I had been to Padmapada, a village in eastern India, a number of times previously to visit the family of a close friend. Each time I had been to see the sacred tree that embodies the local goddess, the deity of community. This new experience was an unprecedented honor, being allowed to witness the ceremony of invocation in which the dynamic power of the supreme goddess Chandi was requested to subsume and transform that of the local deity, the Gramadevta. It was a very special ritual enacted upon rare occasions to implore the aid of the goddess in overcoming a difficult domestic problem. My Indian friend, Babu Mohapatra, understanding my wish for insights into Hinduism as preparations for writing this book, had arranged this special puja. The entire ritual had taken 2 priests 2 hours preparing and dressing the image of the goddess, drawing a sacred diagram upon the ground and building a fire upon it, and feeding it with clarified butter, ghee, all the while continuously singing her names and praises. As a middle-aged cultural anthropologist and art historian who had already spent over half my life studying India, I prided myself on my objectivity. I might feel empathy towards a particular subject or situation, but as a scholar, I tried to distance myself to observe and take note. Despite my resistance at that moment, as the fire flared brightly and the spirit of the goddess was invoked to enter the tree and be available to the goddess, I actually felt her presence. I felt a change in the atmosphere, a palpable sense of power vibrating throughout the area surrounding the sacred tree. It was a type of pulsating energy, the strength of which I had never before sensed in my life. I was completely surprised, overwhelmed beyond any expectation. In that one moment, I, who had come as an observer, had become a participant. That insight altered and enriched my perception, allowing me to release decades of self-identity as an objective outsider. by being fully present and receptive to an experience so very different from anything I had been raised to understand, my personal and professional life was changed. I was transformed. From that first experience of participating in the worship of the goddess Chandi in the sacred tree in Odisha, my perceptions have grown immeasurably. Now, when I am invited to attend a sacred ceremony, I no longer withhold myself in critical appraisal. I am fully present with all of my senses to absorb the ritual, to feel the full experience. I now realize that my earlier distance was merely the consequence of my own limitations. That many Indians with whom I have interacted have always invited me to full participation, have invited my full participation. For years, I held myself apart. My Western heritage and my unconscious miscomprehension of image worship blinded me from deeper understanding. Today, I believe that I can still retain a grounding in and deep respect for my American Christian background while being receptive to the many facets of Hindu spirituality. I can admire and even be in awe of the ways in which the sacred permeates the lives of Hindu people while still maintaining strong attachments to my own home, family, friends, cultures, and ideals. Awareness of one only enriches the other.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The most obvious question that I thought of while reading this passage was, so can we say that you're a Christian who's prayed in more Hindu temples than he's done in churches?
And when you asked me that this morning, I was floored with the question because I'd never thought of it, and of course it's true. I have been in, yes, I have been in thousands and thousands of shrines, particularly in small communities, rural communities, and in thousands of temples on top of that, big ones. And yes, I prayed much more often in temples than churches. But am I Hindu? No. I'm an American, and I don't think as an American I can truly be Hindu. I think I would have to be raised and born and raised here to truly be Hindu in the sense of what it might be for any of you that were raised in India as a Hindu. But I can be deeply respectful and even deeply empathetic, and I am changed and transformed by the experience constantly. Yeah, we wanted to open to
if
questions.
There's anyone in the audience who has a question for Stephen? Lati.
Right there. Yeah. And I'm sorry it was hard to see those photographs for those of you blocked.
No, thank you for that. I actually had a question also vis-a-vis your own positionality, and just even in anthropology, I think it's about making one's subjective position very transparent. What I wanted to know was just in terms of methodology, how were you able to access people, especially in rural India, without language? Especially all across India.
Right, exactly. That is a problem, without question, yeah. Is that the full question, or is there more?
How were you able to do that, was the question. And the second question is, Daughters of India, what would a Daughters of America look like if you were to write it?
So with the first question, yes, you know, I work in hundreds of language or dialects in India. You know, I mean, I'm not fluent in hundreds of languages or dialects. I can't be. And so, but I communicate easily with people. And for me, the heart and the mind and gesture and movement and willingness and openness and trust are the most important thing. And respect. And so going in with an open heart, going in without judgment, going in without the male objectivity, which I don't know why I have that, but I do, because I consider myself heterosexual, although I don't really care, but I am married for 50-some years, and happily so. But I just don't go in with that quality that most males do, regardless of where they come from. And so doors open to me. It's just the way I am. But as regards to language, it is a problem. And so I have to find someone who speaks one of the languages I speak and helps me to interpret if I'm really trying to find the story, of course. And because if I'm doing like Daughters of India, it's their stories, I might have to make sure that I'm recording it as correctly as possible. And I have to check and double check, etc. Does that answer that enough of a question? And as regards to Daughters of America, I wouldn't even know how to begin, except that I have, women who are American in my life who are my mentors too, many of them, because my life is divided between India. I'm not here for 53 years. I'm here for parts of 53 years and there. And I don't have culture shock, to go back to your thing earlier. I am just the same person on both sides of the puddle, It's just...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two quick questions. One
more question. Yeah, we are going quite late tonight. Anybody?
I want to know, you said you've been to most of the parts of India except the Northeast.
Yeah.
So any particular reason?
Yes, it was
because
prohibited.
It's a very different India over there.
Of course, I would have loved to have gone back any of the early decades I was here, but I was prohibited by the Indian government. I mean, all foreigners were. You could not get permission to go. It was not possible. So I just made my choice that I would work in the other areas, and then I became so embedded with that, and it was so complex, that once the doors did open, which is really relatively more recently as compared to 53 or 4 years, I just haven't been able to go. I have my own work to continue in the areas in which I have. I can't open a new survey at my age. And plus, the work that I do, as I said, is being done. I mean, when I was doing it initially, there weren't many people. Now there are tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people doing the work I was doing initially fairly singly. So it doesn't need to be done. I would love to see it, but I haven't had that opportunity.
Right. Thank you all for being such a lovely, patient audience.
And
Thank
this
you so
is the
much,
launch
Stephen.
of the book. This is the first time I've ever seen it, even 2 days ago. So it's quite exciting. Thank you.
And please do pick up a copy. Stephen is here to sign copies.
If you're interested. There are copies there, yeah. Yep. So thank you.
Thank you.